morning. Thank you, Austin. I hesitated to give Kathy such a long reading for anybody to have to work their way through the great job, and I appreciate it. I want to start by just sharing a story with you that I bet you will maybe identify with the story itself, but I imagine other things will come to your mind. I grew up in Gainesville, Florida, which is a university town. I'm about to walk off, sorry, Zoom. My dad worked at the university. He taught there as a professor, and we lived close by. And my grandparents on my dad's side actually had two places eventually, one in the middle of Florida, in a town called Arcadia. And actually, they lived outside of Arcadia, and their actual address was Nocatee, Florida. And my grandfather had a small orange grove. I've shared that before. If you've been around long enough, you've heard about my grandfather's orange grove. But he also had a beach house not far away on the west coast of Florida, south of, you would know probably Sarasota and then Venice, and then Englewood Beach, which you probably don't know, is where he had a little house. And that's where we vacationed. I never got on an airplane until I was 20-something years old. We just didn't do stuff like that. When you're my age, a lot of us didn't, get around much in airplanes and go all these places that we go now. So, but listen, I was not deprived. I loved going to the beach, and there were some summers I went to the orange grove and worked with my grandfather, and that was fun too. But when we went as a family to,
you can walk around if you want. The Zoom's wide enough that we see it.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I'll try to stay put. Thanks, Juan. When we would get ready to go to, let's say, Englewood, my parents they had really stepped up in the world, and they had a Dodge Monaco, and you got to be old to remember those things. And it had a push button transmission. And anyway, we thought it was a pretty cool car. I was glad they got it because I was about to be old enough to drive. And we had a process before we would go. My dad would pack the car. And the Monaco had a pretty big trunk, but we would carry everything out of the house and set it down by the car. And he would be out there and he would be packing. And once in a while, he'd, go back in the house or something. And I might think that I knew where to put something in the trunk. And so I might pack an item or two. Let me just tell you that there was only one way to pack that trunk, and it was my dad's way. And those things more than likely would come back out and then go in where he wanted them. And so it was quite a process, and he wasn't ugly about it. He wasn't unkind, but he had a way that he wanted to do it. So that's the way it got done. And the reason I share that with you is I'd like you to focus with me this morning on your will, the way you want to do things, the way that you see that things ought to happen or be done. And I just want you to set that in the background of your mind and dwell on that while we talk about that a little bit. So what happens to us when maybe we're not packing the trunk of a car, but we're trying to get something done? We're trying to accomplish something. We're trying to take care of a task. Isn't it natural that we just start to crank through our little pea brains and try to figure out what to do and what's a good way to do it? And some of us are more adamant about things than others, but we all have a plan. We all have a will that we're trying to exercise to get something accomplished. And a lot of times it's good, isn't it? I mean, we're trying to facilitate something, and just because when I go mow the grass, which I don't have to do right now, by the way, that's an advantage of living in an apartment. But when I did have a big yard, I have a way I mow the yard. And you know what? When Cheyenne was still with us, he never mowed the yard properly. Because the way you mow a yard is to go diagonally. Well, first I go around the edges, and then I go diagonally one way, and then I go diagonally the other way, and it's perfect. It's just the way it ought to be, right? And the weird part about that is, would you not be thankful that someone else mowed the yard for you? Isn't it kind of perverse to think that someone has mowed the yard for you, but you're unhappy because you didn't do it properly? That's crazy, right? But we think that way sometimes, and we look at things like that in that manner sometimes. And even if we were out exercising this will of ours and doing good things and trying to accomplish things for others, by the way, a lot of you in here, I know for a fact, are exercising your will in ways to help other people. So there's a lot of good going on, right? But sometimes we get in a mode where we may exercise our will, and it's not really for the best. And usually we see this in others before we ever see it in ourselves. And we look out and I say, oh my goodness, I can't believe that Jim is doing that. He ought not to be doing that. He's doing it the wrong way, or whatever my judgment might be. We look out and we think that, and we see, in fact, at times that people do seem to be doing things that are certainly not good. I've quit listening to the news because I can't watch all these things that people are doing that they're exercising their will, all right, but it's sure not good. It looks like evil to me, right? And I titled this lesson My Way or the Highway because I think we've all met along the way, sooner or later, somewhere, and probably repeatedly, we've met people that see it that way. It's going to be my way, or you can hit the highway and just get out of my way. Now, my dad was sort of my way or the highway with the loading the trunk, but he was sweet about it. He never fussed about it. And in fact, I remember him thanking me for putting something in the wrong place, for trying to help. I'm talking about, however, the people that we run into and bump into and sometimes become ourselves when we get in that mode of, hey, there is only one way to do this, and good or bad, it's my way. Now, there's a situation that we really need to focus on here that comes up, and that is that we can carry that attitude into our spiritual lives, and it can be bad business, right? In fact, we were in such a state of exercising our will that the Bible tells us that in the exercise of that will, we have every one of us in this room have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, what God intended. So when we move into the spiritual world and we start exercising our will, we need to be careful. In Romans 3:23 or 3:23, where it says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, we see that there's something to be learned here. There's something to be uncovered because this has gone wrong, really wrong. And so I want you to turn over, if you would, with me to Ephesians 5, and I want to just kind of drive that idea home that we see in Romans in multiple places, actually. And look at, let's just begin in verse 3, and we'll just read a few verses here. It's kind of depressing, but follow along with me. But among you, there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality, or of any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. Now listen to this. For of this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a man as an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. So you know what? If we are exercising our will and making decisions to live our lives in this kind of way, what does God have to say to us? We end up without an inheritance in the kingdom. It couldn't be any more serious than that. That we would make decisions and choices that would separate us from the Father. So we have this will that we're exercising. Sometimes we exercise it in a way that actually works out pretty good, and maybe we did or we didn't ask for God's input in that. We also have these situations where, we're exercising our will in such a way that is so serious and so bad that we're separated from God. And there's another, and this is a lot more mundane, but I want to mention it. Sometimes one of the consequences of exercising our will is that we just wear ourselves out, beating our heads against the wall, trying to push something forward in the manner in which we think it ought to happen. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been in that situation where I do that at work all the time. It gets me in trouble at work. When I know better, what makes me think I know better when I'm working beside a guy who started with the Pritchards when he was a teenager and he's almost 60 now? You think he's learned a thing or two? I've only been with him 10 years. So anyway, you probably think of things as well that you've done that when you get to the end of the day, like I do sometimes, you're just flat worn out. And part of it's because you've been push, trying to get your will in place somehow, some way. Now, we have other warnings about this in the scriptures, and let's try to breeze through a few real quick. I was taught a verse way back in Jeremiah. I want you to turn over to Jeremiah chapter 10, and just flip back there real quick. Push buttons and get back there real quick. And this is a great verse. It's easy to remember, and maybe it'll stick with you too. This is a prayer of Jeremiah, and it reads, I know, O Lord, that a man's life is not his own. And we're going to read a scripture that actually says that in the New Testament in just a second. Then he says, it is not for man to direct his steps. Isn't that interesting? So who do you think ought to be in charge? Well, here we are Sunday morning. Would you imagine God's supposed to be in charge? God has a plan for your steps in mind. Okay, now let's flip over real quick to, I tell you what, I'm going to change the order. Let's the order of what's in my notes. Let's turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, because that'll tie in directly with what we just read. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Bob, I realize that one of these days when I'm doing this, I'm going to have to do the whole PowerPoint thing. Silly to do it this way. So verse 19, chapter 6, listen to this. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price, therefore honor God with your body. So what does that have to do with this? Well, he's making a pretty powerful point here. Jesus went to the cross to redeem us. He bought us at a price. And what was the price? His life. Exactly. His very own life. So when you and I are running around out here pushing our will and trying to figure out what to do and what ought to happen next. Think about that. Think about that. I'm here. My salvation has been purchased by Jesus Christ, and the price was his very own death, his suffering and death. Okay, so now let's back up to James. I think I shared this the last time I was preaching. And, I discovered I have these notebooks where I keep this stuff. And I discovered the other day, having been with this church for I don't know how long we've been here now, but I have enough notebooks, I think, to preach every day, every week of a year now, which is kind of cool. Not good for you, but it's kind of neat. So in chapter 4 of James, we read, now listen, you who say, verse 13, today or tomorrow we'll go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast and brag, and all such boasting is evil. What do we say to each other? It comes from right here. What do we say without even thinking repeatedly? Don't we say to each other, I'll see you Monday on Zoom, what? The Lord willing, right? So we say it, but we don't always live that way, I'm afraid. At least I know. Now, these are kind of the warnings and kind of the general situation that we're aware of as we go about exercising our will. These are some of the consequences. These are some of the scriptures that speak to it. And now I want to, first of all, take you back to the reading that Austin did for us. Okay? In fact, let's turn over there again because there's two things I want to actually specifically point out. So go back to Matthew 26, and I want to read this with you. Not the whole thing, but a couple of comments that Jesus makes. Okay, so he's taken Peter, James, and John with him into the garden, right? He's asked them to stand watch, to pray, and then he goes off by himself. And in verse 39, he says, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. And do we think, ooh, I wonder if he should have even said that, But look what he says next, and let's take it together. He says, yet not as I will, but as you will. And I see in that something for us, because we do have ideas and plans, and I think God gave us the ability to do those kind of things. And yet, what did Jesus do here? I don't think Jesus in his human flesh wanted to go suffer all that was going to lead up to finally his and including his crucifixion. In my flesh, I've struggled with that. I bet every one of you have wondered, what would I do if, I was being treated this way? But Jesus then follows up. But he asks, is there another way? But not my will, yours. Now it's interesting. Go down to verse 42. And he's gone away a second time to pray. And he says, my Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done. To me, it's almost like he's putting an exclamation or an asterisk on what he said before, prayed before, But Father, if this is the way that it needs to happen, then your will be done. And I wondered, and maybe you have too, as Jesus prayed, maybe, I hesitate to say this, but maybe in the process of his prayer, he's coming around to embracing the Father's will here. Take that or leave it. Okay. Now let's turn over. So we have Jesus, and we have his example, and it's an extreme situation, isn't it? He's letting go of his will, knowing that he's going to the cross to a horrid, horrible, painful death. And yet, your will, not mine, be done. Now, let's think about one of these biblical characters that we love and we read a lot from, Paul. Okay? So let's turn over to Galatians. We sing about this, by the way. Galatians chapter 2. And let's see kind of what attitude Paul had developed about his will. And we're going to just read one verse here. And I see now that at some point in my life I underlined this. So we're in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. And I wouldn't even dream of trying to sing this to you, but it reads, I have been crucified with Christ. This is Paul speaking. Okay? Just like we've been studying in Romans, and we're united in death with Jesus Christ in our baptism. Well, Paul says, I've been crucified with Christ. I've died. And I no longer live, but what? But Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. To me, that's it. That is Paul's life described in one verse. How he saw it and what he was about. Okay, one more here. Let's turn over to that Romans section where we've been studying in Romans chapter 6. And let's think about, we got Jesus, we got Paul. Now, what about us? So here in Romans, we read about that. So I'm going to start, as you might imagine, in verse 1 of Romans chapter 6. What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? Or don't you know that all of us who were baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? Therefore, we were therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life. Now, this kind of will lead into where I want to go next. When you were baptized, I want you to go back and remember that. Bob still will remember that, but most of you in here can remember. Okay, so I want you to go back to that moment, and I want you to try to remember what you were thinking. Okay? Now, I know that there's probably no chance that any of you in here who have been baptized into Christ missed reading what we just read. I don't know. I'm sure I had read it many times because the guys that were studying the Bible with me, did a pretty thorough job, over 2 years that I'm embarrassed about. But it did take me 2 years. But I know that I was aware of these things. And you know what I recall in getting in the car to go over and be baptized at the church. I remember thinking that this is going to turn my life upside down. And you've heard people use that phrase before. But I literally believed and knew that this was going to completely change my life. I was going this way. And when I came up out of that water, I was going to be going this way. And that's one of the reasons it took me so long, is I wasn't sure I was happy to leave this direction over here. But what do you remember? I'm not asking you to speak out. I just, I know you probably had an expectation about what this new life of yours might be like. And the thing that I didn't understand, that I'm still learning, is that, and I knew some of it up here, is that what was going to happen is that I was entering into a journey, and my mind was going to be transformed, just like the scriptures talk about. The transforming of my mind and my heart was beginning that night. It happened to be at midnight. And And that's exactly what it's been. It's been a journey that's ongoing. And I'm going to share with you now some ideas that I have been trying to pursue for about the last 2 months. Okay? And I'm going to share, my purpose in sharing this is to ask you to consider what you might do. And these aren't even really suggestions. These are just things that I've been doing. Okay, you can take it or leave it. But what I'd like for you to do is consider the significance and the importance of replacing my will with the will of God, and in your life, the same process, replacing Brett's will with the will of God. And what is it that I might practice that would help me with this? Now, this is a little bit like Bob's story about the discussion he had with some of his classmates one day about fasting. And the one guy was all fired up and was just excited about the idea of fasting. He's standing there with Bob and these other guys, and he's talking about the need for fasting. And he realizes that they're all quiet, the other guys. I don't know if you remember this story, but the reason they were all quiet is that they were already fasting. And this guy was just getting the idea. So this could be exactly like that. It could be that Bill is just getting the idea, and you've already been doing every one of these things, or maybe some of them. But if that's the case, then I'm embarrassed. But whatever. This is working out good for me. So when I throw some of these things out, this is just something that's helping to order my thinking and my day and my practices. Okay. So the first thing is pretty obvious, and I'm going to have to keep on my list. I've already, by the way, forgotten a great example of exercising your will, which was Saul when he was supposed to go destroy the Amalekites. And you can read that on your own in 1 Samuel 15, and I'm sorry I forgot that. But the first thing that I've been trying to consciously be aware of when I begin my day is that this is going to be a day where I'm going to seek God's will in my life. Okay? Pretty obvious, but it's a mindset. The next thing that I've been doing, and for me this has been really super significant, I decided that the only way, and you've heard this stuff talked about before, but I decided for me, the only way that right now in 2021, that I could see my way forward to make progress was that I was going to have to get up earlier. So I am, and this is not, by the way, my arm won't go back far enough to pat myself on the back anyway, so that's not what this is. I'm just talking about what I'm having to do to make progress down this path. So I was getting up at 5 o'clock. I'm getting up at 4:30 now. And so the reason I did that is so that I could have a half hour to myself for this purpose. Because as much as I've rationalized in my head over the years that I can read and study at night, which is what I've been doing forever, for eons, I decided, I want to see some success here, and I decided that I just need to do this in the morning. Again, take it or leave it. So I'm getting up in the morning, and what I'm doing is I'm sitting down with a cup of coffee, and I'm doing a reading. Okay? What is the purpose of a reading? And I'll give you a couple ideas here in a minute. What is the purpose of the reading? Well, I cannot possibly do God's will if I don't know what God's will is. And I'm not trying to dream up God's will because I have it. I haven't. And you haven't. So I am sitting down and I'm doing a reading, which is about 20 minutes long. And let me throw out a couple ideas. You do your own reading, okay? But here's a couple ideas. There's a great passage of scripture in Philippians chapter 2 that you could read. You could start, I jotted down here, you could read verses 1 through 18, and we know what that's about, right? That's about well, it's all significant, but the portion there about the life of Christ and how he lived his life and how he was obedient even to the point of death, going to the cross. So that's a reading that you could do. Another one I thought of was a combo. We were talking about this in class Wednesday night, Romans chapter 7, where Paul is talking about the solution to this battle that he has. And in his head, the law is good. He wants to do what is right. And what does he see the members of his body do? Those little rascals, they go out and they sin. And what's the solution? Thanks be to God in Christ Jesus. So we know that solution. But you could do a reading. You could start with that, and then you could move over to Galatians chapter 5 and verse 16 and on. And there you'll find a whole passage about living according to the Spirit. And that'd be a nice combo for your reading in the morning if you wanted to do it. Here's my issue over here, and here's what God has in mind over here. So point is, I'm getting up and I'm purposely setting my mind that today is going to be a day that I pursue God's will. Then I sit down and I read and I try to fill my heart and mind with God's word. And then I pray. You knew that was coming, right? But this is where I embarrass myself, because I know I have one person in the room that goes in the closet of all things and prays. And that's an example I haven't gotten to yet. But anyway, I decided that I was going to pray on my knees. And I've prayed on my knees off and on for however many years I've been a Christian. But not every day in the morning first thing before I do anything else. So I just determined, again, take it or leave it. I just determined for me that might help. And I feel like it is. I feel like it, what I need at that time of day is some humility, right? To listen to God, to read his word, and get prepared to act out the best of my ability, his desires for me. And so I changed my prayer as well. So what I'm praying there when I get on my knees now is I'm asking for things that will enable me to be of help to other people. I'm asking to find that place where I can set aside my will, that I can not live my day selfishly, in a self-centered way, to be dishonest. These core things that I think are God's will for me. And then so a big piece of it is asking God to work in me in a way that will make me available and able and capable to serve other people, to have that mindset, okay? And then along with this, all day long, over and over and over again, I am praying that simple one-liner, not my will, but your will be done. And I'll tell you how I know when to do that during the day, is I've developed and kind of considered the indicators that I'm about to veer off the path. So I know if I'm starting to get agitated about something, or maybe I'm beginning to worry about something, or obviously I'm angry about something, those are indicators for me that I'm about to jump the tracks. You know, that narrow gate and that narrow path, I'm about to get off that path. And so I have some indicators that tell me, pray right now, pray. And it may be only, not my will, but yours be done. Now, let me ask you a question. Is Christianity a self-help program? Is the Bible a self-help book? You know, I once thought, who's that big guy, Tony something, that used to do the seminars? What's that guy's name? Anybody remember? Tony Robbins. I bought that guy's stuff one time. And it's a self-help program. This is very important, what I'm sharing with you this morning. This Bible is not a self-help program. It's a revelation of God's love for me and his plan for me and you. It's not a self-help program. And what do I learn in here? That God is a God for which nothing is impossible. He's a God of the miraculous. He's the God that created all of this, created me, you. He is the creator God, the only one. And so this is maybe a little twist in thinking, is to view all of this with an expectation of, if I can lay my life down, like it's talked about in Philippians chapter 2, if I can lay my life down for God and make myself available, the question becomes, what will he do in my life? What's next? What could happen? You know, have you prayed and prayed and prayed about things that in your own life and character that you struggle with? Some of those things you may pray about those things forever. I don't know. But what if God really is who we read about here? Is it possible? Is it not possible to believe that he could be at work in us, changing us, doing things for us that we can't do? We can't do for ourselves. Let me ask you this. Were you smart enough to avoid sinning? Were you smart enough, powerful enough, sharp enough to not sin? You know the answer, right? We've already read it. It wasn't possible, it's not going to be possible. So if God is capable of planning and providing for our salvation, take care of something that we couldn't take care of ourselves, is it possible that he could work in your life or mine and change us to be more what he wants us to be? For what purpose? For what purpose? I believe the purpose is to display his glory, his power, and his love in his people. Now, I prayed this morning like I described. I read it like I described. And I went to get donuts this morning. Well, I pray in my truck a lot during the day because I'm in my truck all day long. Well, I was in it this morning and I was praying. And I was praying and asking that God would help me not to be selfish and self-centered today. And into my consciousness popped this idea of selfishness. And I realized as I prayed and as I drove along, I thought two things. This is not good because something's coming here having to do with selfishness. And it just got me thinking. And so I realize now that there's some things that I need to consider that came to me just in the truck praying. So listen, this is not, what I'm sharing with you this morning is not some, maybe if it comes across this way, I apologize, but I'm not talking about some kind of hocus pocus Bill's got some kind of whacked out idea here about to live his life and he can have it. If that's a piece of it, I hope God will reveal that to me. Really, all I wanted to share with you today is that God, I believe that God is present for you and me each and every moment of each and every day that we're alive here in the flesh. And that he has plans for us. And a lot of times those plans are not according to our will. Sometimes they are, and yet what are the possibilities? What could be happening in your life and mine if we take maybe one more step toward him, whatever that might look like? And it may not look like what I've shared with you at all. But let me close with this. I had a friend in Gainesville who was a young married guy, just like I was in the mid-'80s. And his name was TJ Colsar, and his wife's name was Debbie, and they had a couple little kids, and I can't remember the kid's name at this point. It's been a few years. But when he was baptized, he had a dream. Only Bob and Kelly could possibly remember this, because the rest of you weren't here when I shared this before. He had a dream. And I admit, I thought it was kind of whacked out. But he had a dream that God was going to use him like Paul. That God could change his life and use him to impact people all over. And the sad part for me is that I can't tell you how it turned out. I know how it started out because I was with him for a few years. And he was pretty much about God's will and living a pretty cool life, But I don't know what your vision for you is or what you think is possible or, I don't know. Jim and I have started getting together here the last few months, and we're kind of sharing with each other these things and trying to help each other along the way. So I don't know what it would be for you or if you have an interest, but I appreciate the time to be able to share this with you, and I'd be happy to chat with you. Oh, golly, Bob. I told Bob Hoff, I'm such a liar. It's 12 after 11. Sorry. Juwan, come give us some announcements. Thank you.